Cool.
All right, so we're here with John Pollock, the Fight Networks John Pollock from Canada, our favorite Canadian. Well, you and
favorite.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks, John, for coming on. I've been harassing you for months, man. So I appreciate your time, and we'll get down to our topics.
Yeah.
It's great to be here, guys. Yeah, I've been super busy of late, but I always love coming on the show with you guys.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Man. Thank you. Yeah, we know you're a busy guy. You got a lot of things going on. For one thing, I mean, get right into it. There's a lot of things going on in the world of MMA right now, especially this past, either this morning or yesterday. I mean, with the news of the 145-pound division, the women's division.
Yeah.
And the matchup they made with Holly Holm and Jermaine Doradame, that's how you pronounce her name, right?
Everyone's gonna have to learn the pronunciation.
Everybody's gonna have to pronounce the name. I know the fighter, but I'm gonna have to pronounce her name. They've scheduled that for the 145-pound championship, leaving Cyborg out. Man, what do you make of this? This is to me, this is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, on the surface, the idea of creating this championship and Cyborg is not part of the equation. Mm-hmm. I think that part is kind of nuts when you think about all this. Now, we do know that the fight was offered to Cyborg for January 21st, which that show ended up getting moved. And then February 11th, she wasn't able to take either of those dates. Yeah. So I think that there is good and bad to this for Cyborg. The bad is that I think everyone believes Chris Cyborg is undisputably the top featherweight in the world and should be fighting for that championship. They needed a fight for Brooklyn. That's why this is happening. At least this does create this weight division. For all of their discussions about they didn't want to add this weight class, there wasn't the depth, they're now creating it, and Cyborg doesn't have to go through this process now of going to 140, answering the questions about not going to 135. You now at least have a division which, in theory, is healthier for her. Yeah. Though the fact that, guys, we're in December and she still is feeling the effects of that weight cut from September, that's troubling to me that, she's still dealing with those problems. And from her words, I mean, it was just a horrendous weight cut for the Lena Landsberg fight.
Yeah. Right. We all know in 2016, titles don't mean anything. I think this, having Holly Holm fight for the title is a clear indication of that. Do you think that Holly Holm should be in that spotlight, considering that she's dropped 2 fights in a row?
Yeah, I mean, it is strange when you're looking at the fact that Holm is coming off of 2 losses, the fact that Derandami has had 2 fights in 3 years. Yeah. It's a fight for the sake of a fight to me, and I feel they believe that on its own, it's not enough. It needs to have this championship added to it, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think we can all say that Max Holloway and Anthony Pettis, the level of interest in that fight to me was the exact same with or without an interim championship installed into the picture. I mean, it made for a nice photo op that Max Holloway has a title coming out of it, but I think everyone's interest was the same, that this is a great fight at 145 pounds, regardless of a title being there. Right. So I just feel it's this belief that we can't put this fight on a pay-per-view unless there's some bells and whistles attached to it, that being our 11th championship that we're going to introduce. But as you guys know, as we've all seen, just being a title fight, it doesn't mean this is going to be a great pay-per-view success. It's just not enough for people. And that Brooklyn card, it's going to need more than just Holly Holm and Jermaine Durandamy. You're going to need something on top of that. The Barclays Center is a big building. You're coming back to a market after 205. There's going to be high fan expectations for that show.
Yeah. And then with Cyborg, I know she said she couldn't make the weight in that amount of time. Is that problematic for the UFC? Just because I know she just got ties with her nutritionist for the last fight. Was it John Lockhart or George Lockhart?
George Lockhart.
And she's got a lot of issues going on. I know she just got her citizenship, so she's got a lot going on outside of the octagon. Is it problematic for the UFC just the fact that she can't make it in that amount of time? She won't be one of those champs that you can call on like DJ that just can show up and defend his title. Is this an issue for the UFC?
Well, in this case, it's definitely costing her because I really don't believe there's any conspiracy theory against Cyborg from the UFC. Yeah. I feel if she was ready, she'd be in this fight. So I don't look at this as just black and white, that this is, the UFC is wronging Cyborg. I mean, they did offer her this opportunity, and the UFC, they believe they need this for that Brooklyn card. So I don't think they're going to just penalize themselves just to be fair to all parties involved. I mean, Cyborg, for all rights and purposes, should get the winner of this fight. But it's definitely something where I think Chris Cyborg needs to sit down and assess how she is cutting this weight. She works with with an expert in the field in George Lockhart, or at least was up until this point. And it's very concerning when you hear that this weight cut, she was outlining the fact that her blood was so thick they couldn't even withdraw blood when she was having problems after the fight. I mean, there's a problem there, and she needs to be addressing that and looking at, I mean, is 145 a weight class she should be fighting at? I think she's asking a lot of her body. We've seen that documentary ahead of the Leslie Smith fight and the torture she put herself through. So I think there's a lot of things that Cyborg needs to assess, because in theory, she's getting the weight class she has wanted all this time, and still there's issues with that. So I think we have to look at her health first and foremost, and how it's affecting her career, because there's definitely issues to address. Yeah.
And speaking of Chris Cyborg, she's still the Invicta 145-pound champion, and that's something that people haven't been talking about is Invicta and their 45-pound division. Do you think they're going to get sucked from the UFC to bring girls over to the UFC and having them left with nothing?
It's a great question, because we've seen the precedents when the UFC has set up the 115-pound division. I mean, that largely cleaned out the Invicta division. I don't know where the depth comes from at featherweight. I mean, that was always the argument was, well, we can't create a division just around one person. So we have three people. And how many fighters at 135 are realistically looking at going up to 145 and fighting the Cyborgs of the world potentially? I mean, you're giving up a lot of size. It's a new division. Some might find, hey, it's less of a weight cut, I can go up there. But I think that's going to be a smaller amount. I mean, I don't want to see Leslie Smith. I mean, that was just such a size discrepancy at UFC 198 that she should not be fighting at 145. I just think that's crazy. And we saw the Invicta model, like Cyborg, she was the draw, and she was just running through these women. Yeah. So I don't think you can really build a division around these other featherweights. I mean, there's even, your Marlus Kunins that Bellator has under contract. I mean, you do have Bellator that's as well after some of these featherweights, and they don't have the deepest division. So it certainly seems like it is a short-term decision to just have a championship fight on this card, and building out this division, that's going to take a lot of time. And I don't know if they can necessarily do it with the kind of depth that they've been able to find at 135 and 115.
Yeah. I think because a lot of people know that she's the uncrowned champion, or she will probably most likely be the uncrowned champion at that time after this fight takes place, that build-up for her eventual title shot against either the winner of Holly Holm or Jermaine I can't pronounce it. Durandamy. You do it a lot better than I do. I think that buildup will be a lot. The anticipation for her 145-pound champion debut, I think, would be built up a lot more, especially if it's against Holly Holm, I think.
Yeah, that's a big fight. Yeah. That's a real big fight at 145 pounds. Presuming that is the direction they go in, I think Holm is certainly going to be favored in this fight. And you're right. I mean, whatever short-term loss there is for Cyborg not being on the Brooklyn card, you would think that she should get the championship fight coming out of it. Yeah. And you can build that, whether it's in Brazil, whether it's elsewhere. I mean, with Holly Holm specifically, I mean, her last fight against Valentina Shevchenko did really good numbers on Fox. So I believe that, and Chris Cyborg, conversely, the Lena Landsberg fight did pretty well, and that was on the back of Cyborg. So you have two very marketable women in Holly Holm and Chris Cyborg, and that can be certainly a big fight that you can build to.
Well, I think John is so good about pronouncing names because you do cover New Japan Wrestling. So
correct.
Some of those wrestling names or Japanese names are kind of impossible for us.
I do pretty good, but this one I had trouble with. I don't know why. Another person who's been in the news too is Jose Aldo. Obviously with the talks with him and Max Holloway, but he's also been talking about him not support of Bjorn Rebney and the new Fighters Association with all the other fighters like GSP. He's more backing the MMA FA. Right. What do you make of this? Do you think there'll be a rift between those who maybe look at Bjorn as someone who they cannot trust and won't back this new association, and guys like Jose Aldo who prefer a different route.
I really got the sense, and this was, with the conference call to originally announce the Athletes Association, we all heard coming out of it how polarizing Bjorn was. That was the major topic, was Bjorn Rebney. And being here in Toronto last week during Fight Week, I really get the sense that Bjorn Rebney, as much product knowledge as he has, I think there's a value to having Bjorn Rebney. This guy cannot be the public face of this. This guy cannot be the one going out and doing the interviews, because I think he is so polarizing to so many fighters that if this guy is going to hold back fighters from joining this, then he becomes a detriment rather than an asset. And it's not black and white. You can weigh the fact that he brings a lot of product knowledge and intelligence to this to help these guys, but let's juxtapose that with what he is detracting in terms of recruiting fighters, getting people on board with this. I don't know for the long-term viability of the Athletes Association if Bjorn Rebney can be a part of this. And if fighters are going to be willing to get into bed with an organization that, even though they've outlined that this guy is just an advisor, he's not on the board, but he's the one out doing a lot of interviews, and he has kind of become the face of this thing. So they knew that getting into this. There's good and bad with Bjorn Rebney, but I feel for fighter solidarity, that's going to be a tough pill for some fighters to swallow. I mean, imagine trying to sell this on an Eddie Alvarez, for instance. I don't think that could happen. And there's probably a lot of fighters who have heard similar stories that were that the scare tactics that were out there, that they're just not going to trust Bjorn Rebney. And that's going to be a real issue for the Athletes Association going into next year.
Yeah, because, I mean, he has vendetta for the UFC, and it shows, in his interviews. But do you see any kind of union, like, as far as are these different associations coming together, as one in the future?
In a perfect world, they do. Yeah. I just feel they're out for different goals. I mean, we know the Athletes Association, it's centered around UFC fighters and working towards an association. The MMAFA, it's more all-encompassing of mixed martial arts. They want to try and get the Ali Act to benefit MMA, oversee it. They believe a union is absolutely critical to this, which the association probably long-term does need as well. Yeah. There can be some common ground, but there's a lot of differences between the two, and it's very difficult, I think, at this level to get all these guys onto one page. It is fractured, I feel. If you're a fighter that's just trying to observe this from the outside, it's really like putting your chips onto a number and hopefully it comes up if you're playing blackjack. I think a lot of them have so many questions and they don't know which horse to back in this race. Yeah. So I think for the long term, it would be great if it could just be one unified front, but I really don't see that happening, at least not in the near future.
Right.
And I don't believe the PFA has said anything, right? With Jeff Boris and that associated and that union, they're pushing more for a union. I haven't really heard much from them as of late.
They've been very quiet because, I mean, we know that Lucas Middlebrook has left, Leslie Smith has left. That's a big blow to that group. I think they came out, they had a good message back in August, but I think it was a big issue when those names got released and Leslie Smith and Lucas Middlebrook were very public about why they were leaving. Again, it comes down to fighters that are, by nature, when it comes to these unions and associations, they're going to be concerned. This is their livelihood, and they need to trust these people completely. So if there is any question about the trust factor, which I'm sure many fighters have with the PFA and the Athletes Association, they're going to be very hesitant to get on board with these groups. Yeah. So that's a big factor. And I think the PFA has lost a ton of momentum since August because of that.
Yeah.
And last weekend we had UFC 206 with Max Holloway getting the interim 145-pound title. A very exciting fight, a very impressive fight, by one Max Holloway. And it's kind of weird because it leaves that 145-pound title, not meaning anything, only because, Conor McGregor got stripped of his title. Are you excited for the 145-pound division without one Conor McGregor?
It's definitely a blow. The fact that Conor McGregor is not there. I mean, he was somebody that, one Conor McGregor title defense is probably equal to 4 or 5 title defenses from Jose Aldo. That said, and a lot of this is kind of focused on the fact I was covering Max Holloway all week last week in Toronto for the card. This guy has just, to me, really turned the corner with his personality. He's very engaging. He is someone that I think it's all clicked for him. Yeah. And he felt like a star coming out of Saturday night. I'm not saying him and Jose Aldo are going to do 500,000 buys on pay-per-view, but I'm way more intrigued in that fight today than I was 2 weeks ago, for instance. I think those two, first of all, on paper, it's a great fight, but now it does feel like they are fighting for something. I think we can accept the fact Conor McGregor is probably done at 145, and that was inevitably going to occur. It's not the most ideal parting of the ways from a weight class where a title is relinquished. Yeah. But Jose Aldo and Max Holloway is not a bad consolation prize, and I'm interested to see when that fight is signed, whether it's Brooklyn, whether it's later in the year, because I think Max Holloway is really going to open a lot of eyes in terms of the promotion of that fight, because I think he really turned a corner over the past couple of weeks in this lead up to the Anthony Pettis fight, and really having the star quality that you're looking for. And it'll be interesting to see where he is 6 months, 12 months from now.
Yeah. You have Cub Swanson, who had a really fantastic fight over the weekend. He's also a contender in that division. Is there anybody else in that division that you see in the top 5, top 10 that really stands out to you other than Max Holloway?
Yeah, it's really funny because after Pettis missed weight and we're looking at this, it's like all of a sudden this division that the whole Conor McGregor argument was, well, we've frozen up an entire division. And all of a sudden we're looking at, well, what contenders are we going to have? Yeah. If Anthony Pettis were to have won that fight, you eliminate Frankie Edgar because there was no way they're doing Aldo and Edgar again so soon after a very not one-sided, but a pretty dominant performance from Aldo at UFC 200. Ricardo Lamas, who had just lost to Max Holloway, all of a sudden, Cub Swanson would maybe have become that guy had Pettis won on Saturday. So I don't think Cub Swanson is all that far away from being in the title picture, because with Holloway there, and in particular if Holloway wins, that to me kind of takes away the option of Lamas. Edgar's kind of in a weird position now. So Cub Swanson, Chad Mendes is gone with the USADA suspension. Yeah. So all of a sudden you look at that, and Cub Swanson, to me, upped his stock so significantly on Saturday. A truly great performance, the best fight of his career, by far. Probably a lot of people's fight of the year. So that goes a long way. And I feel Cub Swanson, he could maybe fight. I don't see them rematching him with Edgar necessarily, but maybe you find somebody else in that top 5 picture and Swanson could get the winner. That's very possible for 2017. He was definitely one of the big winners of Saturday night in Toronto.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Now I'm going to switch the tables around and start talking some pro wrestling. Obviously, Joe. Joe lost his title, his NXT title, to Shinsuke Nakamura. Do you see Joe debuting at the Rumble for the main roster, or do you see him kind of waiting out and we see him at WrestleMania?
I would have him. I would have a plan for him now to get him up to the Rumble, and I would want to promote it in advance. I think he's done everything he can at NXT. He's now out of that main event feud with Nakamura. I don't think there's any reason now for him to be at NXT. He's done everything there. I wouldn't even want him as a surprise at the Rumble. I would want to start vignettes now that he's coming to the Rumble. We don't know who he signed. You have both Raw and SmackDown after this guy, and you'll find out at the Rumble he enters the Rumble, and then coming out of it, you find out where he's going on the main roster.
Hopefully SmackDown. They
really do need that kind of injection of fresh main event blood, and he checks off every box of what you're looking for. Yeah. So I would want him in by the Rumble. I wouldn't wait till WrestleMania. It's very tough to debut someone going into WrestleMania. I think you want to have them established on the roster, very much like AJ last year, where you brought him in at the Rumble, and then he had the program with Jericho for WrestleMania. So if it's my call, Joe's in the Rumble.
Right. Yeah. And do you see this Chris Jericho, Kevin Owens breakup, being for a match at WrestleMania for maybe the Universal title?
I think this has the legs to go to WrestleMania. It'll be interesting if they can get through the Rumble without going to the match. Yeah. I think this thing has been laid out really well. they're going heavier with the breakup tees than I thought they would at this point.
Yeah.
But they are probably the best thing on Raw at this
man.
point, and maybe on the main roster.
I'd be so bummed like when they break up. I'm already like sad about it.
I think that they've done such a great job where it's like you love the chemistry between these two, but it's like you'll genuinely have a reaction to this breakup. It's not just some trivial tag team breaking up. They've done such a great job of bringing the audience up to the eventual full-out breakup and feud will mean a lot because of all of the stock they put into this program.
I don't want to see it happen, man.
I think, I mean, that's where it's going, and I think they've done a really good job of just trying to make it very episodic. Each week, it's a step forward in the direction. So the Rumble will be tough because it seems that you almost have to do this match by then, but they may have a great idea to extend it beyond that and get it to WrestleMania. It's certainly a WrestleMania program. And
for sure.
To think about the buildup from this, of where this has gone and the months they will get out of this, where the payoff is at WrestleMania. That doesn't happen too often, that you get that lengthy of a build to a match.
And if they do go to WrestleMania, do you see that as the headliner, or do you see Goldberg and Brock as the headliner?
It's hard to say with the card. I mean, you typically... It's all in what has the momentum in that final couple of weeks going in. I mean, I never would want to cement myself to, this is our main event, this is going on last. Right. I think Lesnar and Goldberg is going to have so much momentum going into Mania. I thought the Survivor Series was a big positive for that. And
that
what they have done,
was great.
Yeah, and what they've done with Bill Goldberg, I mean, I don't think you could have handled this character any better than they did. It's such a 180 from the 2003 run with Goldberg. They did everything right, and they could have easily just got out one match, and that's all the people would be interested in. And instead, you've not only extended that interest in Goldberg, you've built upon it. Yeah. And that rematch, to me, is going to be really big for WrestleMania when you can do the full match, and it very well could headline Mania.
Yeah.
So, I mean, before we let you go, I want to touch on a couple of things from MMA real quick. This weekend, you have Paige Van Zandt against Michelle Waterson headlining their fight. You got a Bellator card this weekend. One of the fights that hasn't been really talked about as of late too much is the fact that Uriah Faber might be retiring this weekend. The longtime, poster boy for the lighter divisions. And what do you make of his inevitable, retirement? Do you think it's time for him, and what do you make of his legacy, pretty much?
I mean, I think his legacy is very strong in what you just outlined. I mean, in terms of the WEC coming along at the time they did, and Uriah Faber being that guy that you could headline cards with, that I think was a real confirmation that you had a star at 145 pounds, and then later in the UFC at 135 pounds. I mean, he was a cornerstone of WEC. When you think WEC, that's the first name you think of. And I think I go back to the Jens Pulver fight in 2008 and how much they promoted around that. Having that, it's very much kind of, guys, reminiscent to me of old territorial wrestling, and much like the Von Erichs in Texas. They were the hometown family that the whole city, it felt like the city shut down on Friday nights for the Von Erichs. And WEC had some of that for their big shows in Sacramento, where Uriah Faber's fighting and the whole city's coming to watch this guy. Frank Shamrock in San Jose, very similar to that feel for the Strikeforce cards. So that's what I kind of remember with Uriah Faber, but someone who in the UFC was a guy that, I mean, you just look at his track record, never able to get that championship, but always in the mix, always right there at the top of the division. And when a lot of people thought that, well, that's the last title fight, he worked his way back to those championship fights. I think we can definitely look at this past year that he definitely has slowed down, and it was kind of, we saw that at UFC 203, and going into this fight, I think it's a good stylistic fight for him with Brad Pickett. There's a nice tie-in because of their legacies together, and it should be an incredible scene in Sacramento. I think it is time for him, and he goes off at a time when he is not diminished to such a degree that you feel you're not seeing, or that you are seeing a very diminished version. I think it's a guy that has slowed down a few steps, and he's calling it a career at the right time.
Yeah, I think so. I completely agree with that. It's going to be, it's kind of sad to see that Uriah Faber is going to be retiring. It shows that, time has passed, and we're getting a little bit older, and these guys are reaching the end of their careers. It's kind of crazy. But what's a sleeper fight for you this weekend?
For this weekend, I mean, looking at that card, I mean, Alan Jouban and Mike Perry, I know it's on the main card. I find that fight really interesting. I've looked at Mike Perry and picked against him, and he's proven me very wrong thus far this year in the UFC. I'm looking forward to that fight. I think that could be a tremendous fight. I mean, Alan Jouban's a really good welterweight. I think it's a good test for Mike Perry at this point. So that one certainly stands out for me. The undercard, I feel, Cole Miller's got so much kind of going around outside. It's the last fight on his deal. And now he's got this fight with Mizuto Hirota, who he was supposed to fight in the Philippines, now is fighting in December. And he's going in with, a lot of, like, a big chip on his shoulder based on how all the Manila stuff was handled. So from kind of just a story perspective, I'm interested in that. But overall, you look at this from top to bottom, it's a pretty good card. And for the main card, I think this is, one of the better Fox main cards this year.
Exactly.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Now, there's one thing that I'm looking forward to is that's you and Waze's Christian show that's coming up. I think it's coming up pretty soon, right? Your Christian show on your podcast.
Yes. Coincidentally enough, it will come out Christmas Day.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah. Can you give us like a preview? Because I really enjoyed Dana Mount's mother coming on last year. That was really fun, and I really enjoyed your random calls to random people. Is that going to be a segment that you guys are going to bring in for this year's Christmas episode?
Yeah, it's each year now I feel there's almost kind of a pressure to come up with some creative guests and stuff like that. You summarized it perfectly. It is very random to the point that I can't even tell you. We have not really planned much for this show. It very much comes together in the last few days. But yeah, there will be a lot of surprise guests. Maybe even surprises to us because I don't know them yet. But that'll be out Christmas Day. It's always a very fun show to reach out to many different people. We're doing a Christmas jingle contest, which anyone can submit their Christmas jingles, and Way and I will review them. So if you're out there and you want to submit, you can post it at lawradio.proboards.com and be part of our Christmas jingle contest and hear your fine work played on our Christmas show at liveaudiowrestling.com.
Yeah, I'm surprised how many talented people are out there with the review SmackDown theme song and the review of Raw.
Maybe you two can put together a song together.
Oh man,
a duo.
I don't know if we have musical talent. Do you have musical talent? Can you play?
I'm not gonna play guitar, but I can't sing.
But there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
But you know
all
what?
People are welcome.
Speaking of Christmas, I kind of held off on your care package because we want to do a Christmas package for you guys. So hopefully you guys can open it up on your show, and going around that theme. Can you tell us your favorite comic book character? Because I know you're into Daredevil and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, I mean I'm really not the comic book person that Way is. I'm more just I'm totally one of the people that comic book fans would just scoff at. I just watch the Netflix series. Yes. I just finished Luke Cage and loved it. I thought Luke Cage was awesome. Yeah. To me, I put it right next to Daredevil. I've really enjoyed Daredevil and Luke Cage. Not as big a fan of Jessica Jones.
Me neither.
And I enjoyed the Luke Cage character on that show, but man, that Jessica Jones series, by the end of it, it was one of those series where it's like, I'm just finishing this so I can say I finished it. That was the miss for me on the series, on the characters in the Marvel universe on Netflix. But Luke Cage was awesome. I highly recommend that show. The music is awesome. The acting is fantastic. And just the cool tie-ins they have, Rosario Dawson's character Claire that is able to weave in all these worlds just with little lines and referencing that she knows a great lawyer for Luke Cage without ruining anything, because I know no one wants spoilers out there. But Luke Cage was tremendous, which I just finished.
You should watch The Flash, man. Flash is a great show.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah,
I will
Flash
check
is a
that
great
out.
show, man. Yeah, but thanks for coming on, John. Really appreciate it. I'm going to try my hardest to tell the fans all your shows that you do. So I think review of Raw, review of SmackDown, review of Way, Bauer and Pollock, and the MMA Report, and then the Law of Live Audio Wrestling.
You nailed
Sundays, it. On TSN Radio, and then soon all over the world on liveaudiowrestling.com, right?
Man, you just hit a bullseye. Awesome, guys.
I'm a big fan, man. I download all your stuff. I really enjoy the Bob and Pollock podcast as well. But I've been following your career since your politics days. And speaking of politics, can me and Josh go to Canada? Because we're living in the Trump America right now. We want,
oh man, the immigration site for Canada crashed the night of the U.S. election. No. It was very weird because I was in New York that night on the election night in New York for 205 week, and it was quite the mood in the city. But hey, if I'm not a government official, but you guys are more than welcome. We have we're very welcoming here in Canada. Yeah,
because I mean, you, Way, Ariel, and Bret Hart are 4 fair Canadians, man. So
there you have it. What a group.
Yeah. Dude, I brought my I brought a Canadian flag to high school. I think I told you this last time you were on. Because this is during the Bret Hart anti-America, run that he had in '97. I was a huge Bret Hart fan to go to high school with a Canadian flag with my Hart Foundation T-shirt. So hopefully the Canadian government can see that and welcome me in, because I went out of America for 4 years.
Well, we're right at the level where someone's going to get angry at us for going into politics.
Right? Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, so
very divisive topic, but you guys are more than welcome to come up and join us here in Canada.
Awesome. Yeah, so fans, we can find you on social media and maybe plug in some of your shows.
Well, you plugged all the shows. Yeah. LiveAudioWrestling.com. You can subscribe for free on iTunes. We have shows almost every day. And on Twitter, I am John Pollock, which is tough to spell for some. It's POLLOCK. You can find me there, or at Law Radio. And thanks a lot, guys. It's great to catch up with you and chat.
Awesome, yeah. Have a great day.
All right.
We'll see you.
All right, take care.